Recording in progress.
Alafia, welcome back. This is Ianifa Owini Aboseju Adina Zulu See Me, and this is part two on my discussion around the Mars North Node conjunction, the Saturn Neptune conjunction, as well as a couple of a bonus transit. In part one, we left off with this question on whether or not the Mars North Node transit feels personal or collective. And I felt like it looked whether you're placed or not, this feels very much both personal and collective. So Mars by itself would normally govern very individualistic themes because Mars is the sign of I am. And so Mars governs personal action, conflict, motivation, courage, initiative. And so a Mars transit often feels like, what am I doing? But this one is not operating on its own. Right now, Mars is functioning as the dispositor or depositor of the larger transit, which is the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So Saturn is conjunct Neptune in Aries. This is what we talked about in part one. And Aries is ruled by Mars. So Saturn and Neptune must express themselves through Mars. And so Mars is now the delivery system of that conjunction. So Mars conjunct the North Node in Pisces. So now Mars is sitting on a point of collective density. The North Node represents evolutionary action, karmic pull, and collective movement. So Mars isn't just expressing its own personal will. Mars is now expressing the evolutionary pressure of this moment in time. So what this looks like energetically, this creates a flow like Neptune, Saturn, Aries, Mars, North Node. So the deep mystical revelations, structural changes that we talked about in part one are now seeking action. And Mars is the executor of that action. The North Node is the direction of destiny. So together they say the revolutions must now move. Sorry, revelations must now move. They cannot remain theoretical. So for me, it feels very personal because of its placement. So for me, this is happening in my ninth house. And so for me, this is the area of my life that is reflective on philosophy, spiritual teaching, belief systems, truth, and guiding others through knowledge. So when Mars is active in this area, it gives me this feeling of I need to speak or I need to articulate what I'm seeing, which is literally, what's happening right now. Also, in our class yesterday, there was I asked a pointed question of my students of what they're seeing for me in particular. And that was a general message that came through. So, with this transit for me personally, this is aspecting my natal midheaven. So that means my midheaven sits in the ninth house when you use whole sign astrology. That's where my midheaven is. It is also the placement of my south node, and those two items are conjunct. So the midheaven represents legacy, public role, leadership, and contribution to society. So when a transit touches the midheaven, it's like my role in the world is being activated. This doesn't necessarily mean fame or public prominence. It just means whatever my responsibility is very loud. This is also aspecting my south node. And the south node represents past mastery, familiar patterns, or old identities. So with this being activated, it's asking us to move beyond what we already know. So it may feel for me like I know how to operate in my old way, but I'm being asked to step forward differently. This is also triggering the moon in my 10th house, since that's where the Saturn and Neptune conjunction is. And so when my moon is being activated, my emotional awareness is very much to my public contribution. It's very much connected. Um, so what I feel internally must somehow be expressed outwardly. So thinking about the dispositor energy that is Mars. So Mars is the dispositor of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so this feels like a next step being taken on the journey. The dispositor in astrology essentially acts like a translator. So Saturn and Neptune are creating this revelation. That's what we talked about in the last video. And Mars has decided what is going to happen next. So it's like the mysteries are surfacing with Saturn and Neptune. And this truth is becoming visible. Mars is demanding that we take an action, and our North Node is determining the direction of the action. So for me, this is very much a leadership oriented thing. And for me, one of the thoughts I had is I don't have any delusions of being like Wonder Woman and saving the world, because I have a responsibility, but it's not, everyone isn't my responsibility. Now, on the collective energy, when this is about us also understanding it takes more than one person. It's about understanding it takes more than one person. So it talks of it's many people stepping into their specific roles. And when we look at for my temple of Turupungunda, and even for the Egbe, in terms of the messages Ifa has been giving, and even like when I listen to other elders in the tradition talk about what Ifa has been saying, even just some other content creators who are spiritual in nature, they're like, it's time to step into who you are. So this is many people stepping in their respective roles, whether it's teaching, organizing, healing, protecting, beautifying, growing, whatever that is, creating art. Each person is contributing to the larger shift. So the question is that the Mars North Node is ultimately asking is, now that you know, what will you do? Not in this hero complex, but in a sense of alignment. What action reflects the truth that you see? What action is reflecting the truth that you see? So the other thing that I was looking at is the South Node and how that energy has been manifesting. And a lot of times people say you're moving away from your South Node, but what I find and what I've heard other like traditional astrologers say is the South Node is the launching point. Like the way you slingshot. It's you pulling back into the South Node, almost like for those of you who understand the principle of Sankofa, that gives very much to me the relationship between the South Node and the North Node. You're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to looking at things of the past. You're taking those strengths, those wisdoms that you have gained from past experiences, the talents, the skills you gained from past experience, and using those things to propel you into where the North Node is trying to take you. So it's like an arrow, and the arrow moves toward the North Node, but the force of the arrow comes from the South Node. So the South Node contains previous mastery, lived experiences, ingrained talents, patterns you already know how to navigate. So those things create the propulsion towards the North Node. So for me, these are things like my nonprofit work, organizing communities, fundraising, leadership, building systems and structures. All of those things play a part in how the type of ENF I am now. So all of those competencies are tools, and we're not meant to abandon our tools. We're meant to use them in service of the North Node. We're meant to use them in the service of the North Node. So now it feels like the past experiences that you had are clicking into place. It's those past experiences are clicking into place. They were preparing you for this very, very this very important activation. So I won't get too far into that, but I will talk about how the Mars North Node transit is activating this kind of rebirthing moment that we are experiencing. So Mars activates movement. So when Mars hits the North Node, people will feel restless, compelled, and unable to ignore their direction. it's a less gentle invitation and more like you've been preparing long enough. Move. And because Mars is also the ruler of the Saturn Neptune conjunction, it's like the sky, it's like the cosmos is saying, the revelations are happening. Now the builders must step forward. Revelations are happening, and now the builders must step forward. And considering that this is opposing the net where the South Node transit is, like we're looking at how do we make this functional so that it lasts? How do we make it functional so that it lasts? And this reminder that there is so much of your past that was intentional, even if you don't realize it at the time. Even if you don't realize it at the time, there's something in the past that is very much intentional. So now let's look at this through the lens of Ifa, through the language of Ifa. So there, like I said before, this is something I have been, in terms of these correlations, I've been looking at this through the lens of E5 for a while. And the framework didn't start with me. Someone else laid the ground foundation. There is an elder who already laid out the foundation for the zodiac signs. Another one did the planets and the orishas. I simply am taking what has already been done, and carrying it forward. What's been done and carrying it forward. So, in looking at some of these things like the North Node, there just isn't something for the North Node because the North Node is not a planet. It's a theoretical point, in relation to the Moon. It's where the eclipse points happen. So there isn't something. But when we look at what the North Node represents, its closest parallel is Ori. So I looked at this transit through the lens of Ori embodying, because that's what we're meant to do, embodying Ori and the embodiment of Ogun. So Ori as the direction of destiny. Ori represents our chosen destiny, the path our soul agreed to walk, and the internal compass guiding our life direction. That is a very simplified, but will work for this moment, breakdown for Ori. So, when this energy is activated, we can see this as Ori is pulling us towards what we agreed to become. It is time to embody that which we chose prenatally to become. And it's not a forcing where it feels like punishment, but it is a refusing to let us stay where we no longer belong. So now, in conjunction with Ori, one of Ori's teammates in this is that energy of Ogun. But when we look at Ogun beyond the warlord, but understand embodiment of Ogun doesn't mean you're embodying a warlord. You're embodying innovation. You're embodying metallurgy. You're embodying the creation of roads and pathways. You're embodying taking pieces and making tools, taking tools and making systems. We're embodying work and progress and strategic effort. And one of the things I was reflecting on one Oshay with Ogun, what I got from Ogun is, yes, I work, but I work smart, not hard. That's why I have tools. That's why I create tools. That's why I create systems. And that's why I'm constantly innovating. Each innovation makes the work easier. And like those tools and those systems, all of these things are the engine of advancement. So what we're really looking at is Ori and Ogun energy being embodied simultaneously to help us advance, to help us move forward, to help us have more progress. And in this situation, this is us progressing towards something that may not exist yet. Depending on the placement for yourself and other things playing out, this is something that does not exist. You're not following somebody else's path. You are cultivating your own path. You're carving your own path. So, for some people, Ori has chosen a destiny, and there's a road there. You got a roadmap. You got a blueprint to follow. You could just be like, "Cool, somebody's already laid the groundwork. I just got to follow their lead." I just got to follow their lead. And sometimes you have a destiny where you are the one who must cut the road. You are the one that must cut the road. You are holding machete in your destiny and you're cutting this path ahead of you. When the path is already clear, it tends to make things a little bit easier for you. But when the path is new, this requires you to embody courage, to have endurance, to embody faith and knowing, and to give yourself grace and have patience. So in this moment, the embodiment of Ogun is not about the conflict, is for the sake of conflict and war. It's about making movement possible where it previously was not. So those tools of the past, the wisdom of the past as your tools, rather, the wisdom of the past are the tools. You're not creating from nothing. You're pulling from ancient knowledge. You're pulling from ancestral talents, wisdom. You're pulling from your past experience. You're pulling from skills that already have been acquired. These tools then go into the forge. And so now you have forged this machete that was forged a long time ago. And so now you're just looking at how you're going to wield it in order to cut this path for yourself. So this is happening through the lens of Otura Meji. And so Otura Meji carries themes like truth, sacred speech, spiritual insight, perseverance that through divine guidance, and your connection to your spiritual practice. Heavy on what we do with our mouths, heavy on the spoken word, because when we use our words, they can either create or destroy. They can protect or they can leave us vulnerable. They can reveal and they can destroy. That's why it is the comforter and the disruptor. So speech is one of the most powerful tools humans possess. So in a moment when the truth is surfacing collectively, the question now becomes, what are we doing with the truth once we see it? So going back to what we talked about in the first video about the theme around illness and the cure for the illness. So when the truth is revealed, people can create systems that spread the illness, prevent the illness, or heal the illness. And so and it's important to look at those distinctions because knowledge, again, is neutral. How we use the knowledge is what is important. So in thinking about neural pathways, carving a physical path through the forest and forming neural pathways in the brain operate on a similar principle. The first time you cut through the forest, it's slow, it's exhausting, and it's uncertain. But once the path exists, it becomes easier for others to follow. The same happens with thought patterns, cultural shifts, and spiritual evolution. The first person to walk that path often experiences resistance. Later generations simply experience the road. So you don't have to clear the entire forest at once. What happens is you do need to take a swing, though. And you do need to take a step and move forward. And that one step is the thing that actually is clearing away the obstacles. That one act of courage, that one act of faith is what's creating space for another. And then the work essentially builds on top of each other. And over time, the forest becomes roads. So the invitation of this transit. So when we're looking at everything, it's truth is surfacing, destiny is calling, and the question is whether we are willing to take the first step towards the path that does not yet exist. And once the first step is taken, the path begins revealing itself. The path begins to reveal itself. So sometimes you think, your destiny is going to unfold in a particular way. But in this moment, you're seeing there's a different way that it's going to unfold. Your destiny hasn't changed. Where you're headed isn't changed. It's just your GPS is rerouting. Your GPS is rerouting. And sometimes that's because Ori didn't show you everything all at once. But you've gone through a particular clearing process, and now you can see like, oh, well, I thought I was headed this way, but now I see there's these other two ways that I can go and continue to do my work. So being, aware of the shifts and being flexible with the shifts. So the question that was posed around this transit was, is the road something that is being cleared on a personal level, or there are many people clearing the same road simultaneously? And I didn't feel like it. So I started thinking about Ogun as the indispensable force. And in stories of Ogun, when Ogun withdrew from the world, progress stopped. No roads, no tools, no advancement, and humanity was stuck. Not because people lacked ideas or wisdom, but the force that turns intention into movement was missing. And that is what it means to embody Ogun. Ogun is the energy that allows roads to be cut, tools to be forged, obstacles to be removed, and progress to occur. Without Ogun, inspiration simply stays as a dream. So when connect this to this transit, Mars in a Western astrology functions as force. It says enough thinking, move. So when Mars is activated in a chart, especially connected to destiny points, it highlights where movement is required. Not optional movement, but necessary movement. So that's why it feels like a non-negotiable, because that's really what the transit is. So when you consider where Mars is at, whether natally or by transit, this is where you are indispensable to the unfolding of your own path. In this moment, wherever this Mars North Node conjunction is happening in your chart, this is the area of your life where you are indispensable to the unfolding of your own path. This is not in a, you know, narcissistic, egocentric type of sense, but in the sense that there is an action that only you can take. And if the action is avoided, the road will remain blocked. But when the action is taken, movement becomes possible. So on a personal layer, each person has a place in their life where the question becomes, what action am I avoiding that my destiny requires? It might look like speaking the truth, changing careers, stepping into leadership, caring for family in a different way, or creating something that didn't exist before. That action becomes the first swing of your machete. On the collective level, there may be many people across the world experiencing similar moments of activation. Different paths, different manifestation, but the same underlying question. What must be built now that did not exist before? When many individuals take those steps, the collective landscape begins to shift. So then there's this ripple effect. So most things and actions are rarely isolated. A single decision might affect children, partners, communities, students, and future generations. So something that feels like a personal step often becomes a collective influence. So one of the things I thought about is like my children. So my children are both special needs and homeschooled. And the homeschooling I had put in the hands of someone else. And doing that has an impact where it shapes how they learn, what values they absorb, how they understand their identity, and how they eventually show up in the world. That's the ripple effect. And so when we think about the nature of being indispensable, I had to like understand what my role is in those areas and take that aspect of take their learning over because of my role in helping them in that regard. So the nature of being indispensable. What makes something indispensable isn't that it's dramatic. Often it's quiet. It's simply the place where your action is required for movement to occur. Like removing the one fallen tree that's blocking the road. Once that tree is removed, many people can pass through. So when Mars activates destiny, hesitation becomes uncomfortable. Ogun is not a slow moving energy. It's a intentional energy, but it is still not slow. Like there's a fire there. It's not slow, but it is tempered, well managed energy. So when this is happening, there's a pressure here. And a lot of times, and I've heard so many people say it from different traditions and practices, the message, you already know what needs to be done. The clarity may not be perfect, but the direction becomes harder to ignore. So no one clears an entire forest at once or alone. Each person clears their section of the forest. And over time, those sections end up connecting. Eventually, what looks like wilderness becomes a network. So each of us has a place where our action is indispensable. When we take that action, it clears a path not just for ourselves, but for others as well. So, looking at, how this looks, like we are following the head. We're following the head. We're following Ori. Without Ori, the movement has no purpose. Without our Ori, the movement has no purpose. And without Ogun, the purpose cannot move forward. So it's like the Orishas, not just Ogun, but in general, help our legs follow our head. Like we have prayers, especially this year through the World Ifa Odu, that our essay follow our Ori, that our legs follow our head. May our legs carry us to where our destiny is leading us. And the Orishas help us in understanding and being support us in making that happen. Like the head decides and then the body follows. But when the legs encounter something in the way, movement stops. And this is where Ogun's work begins. So also at the time, we need to identify the obstacle. We need to identify the obstacle because the clearing isn't random. There's something specifically in the way. So then the questions become for you, what is actually in the way? Is it internal? Is it external? And do you have the discernment to know which one it is? When we look at even like our personal ones, a lot of times is the question we need to ask, is it dogma or is it truth? Dogma often looks like truth because it gets repeated frequently, but dogma usually shows up as rigid beliefs, inherited assumptions, and narratives people never question. Truth, on the other hand, often requires examination and courage. The obstacle might not be the situation itself. The obstacle might be the story we've been telling ourselves about the situation. So the example I said is like me thinking no one's going to listen to me. Like, when I think about making content, no one's gonna listen to me. So the question is the truth that no one will listen to me, or is the truth that I haven't spoken enough to for people to hear me? And those are two different realities. The first assumes rejection, the second one recognizes unexpressed potential. In that case, the obstacle isn't other people, the obstacle is silence. And Ogun's tool for that obstacle isn't a machete, it's speech. It's not a machete, it's speech. So when I'm looking at this, I'm also looking at like this um manifestation of how things are coming in the sequence that it's coming in. So first we've got this truth that is surfacing. We've seen a lot of that. Truths that are surfacing. And then in the scope of how this is happening, our own personal destinies are becoming clearer. And then this question becomes, what is the action that removes the obstacle, preventing that destiny from unfolding? And that is the moment we're going to be able to make the moves that we need to make. So, what is the real obstacle? And once the obstacle is clearly seen, what tool removes it? Sometimes the tool is courage, sometimes it's speech, sometimes it's discipline, sometimes it's simply building something new. And understand, Ori already knows where you're going. Ori already knows. The obstacle is the thing, but Ori already knows where you're headed. Like, where are you headed? And also considering if the obstacle is real. Like, drill down, ask why. In corporate America, we talk about the 5 whys. So ask why. Why do I believe this is an obstacle, and what specifically is blocking the movement? And if the answer becomes vague or emotional, this often signals belief systems, not barriers. If you sit with this idea for a moment, another question naturally appears. When Ori shows the direction, how do you recognize which obstacles are real and which ones are simply inherited beliefs? So sometimes obstacles are family patterns or cultural narratives. People like us don't do that. You can't make money doing spiritual work. Leadership isn't for you. When you see a belief repeated across generations, that may indicate an inherited structure, not an immutable truth. And sometimes the person noticing the pattern is the cycle breaker. Now, a real obstacle is usually very clear. I want some Jordans. Jordans gonna cost me $200 plus tax. I got $30. I got $30. That's a real limitation. But you could overcome a real limitation with the appropriate strategy. So is this obstacle an absolute, or does it require a plan? And understand you handle this both practically and spiritually. From a spiritual perspective, first and foremost, you need to consult your Ori. Like I'm saying, I want these Jordans. Does my Ori agree that we want these Jordans? This is a tag team. We do things together. Do we want these Jordans? And if so, cool. What how are we going to make this happen? So this is a plan I'm thinking can be executed, and I'm not coming to you empty-handed. Ori, this is my offering to say, and then cool. Once I've done that, now I can go to my ancestors and things like, okay, let's talk about a plan. Let's talk about a plan. And then I could go to Ifa, say, now what do I need to support said plan? And that's not the only thing I'm doing though. So after I've done all this, what am I looking at? Because Ifa will tell me what it is. It will give me the practical things. Do I need a change in behavior? Do I need to make a financial plan? Do I need to go look at some resources? What are the steps that I can be taking? So doing one side or the other is going to create an imbalance. Spirituality without action becomes passivity, and action without alignment becomes chaos. The two working together, this is where movement happens. So that is everything for the Mars North Node conjunction. Let us look at what the Jupiter stationing direct says for us. All right, so last of the transits. Yay! So now we have Jupiter stationing direct in Cancer. And when I saw this, the timing of this happening, I was like, this is important. Like, this is not accidental. When I read the creation story through the Ifa lens, and not one of the ones you typically find that features Oshun, this is like full creation, how the planets, the cosmic gases, all these things came to be. And they talked about the planets and how before there was a controlled system of movement, the potential of them bumping into each other, things like that. So there is an Iron Mole who is responsible for the movement of the planets, the asteroids, stars, all of these things. There's a divinity that controls that movement. And so the movement is intentional. There's a reason, there's a method, there's a science to why the planets are moving the way they are. So Jupiter has been in retrograde for a minute, and now it's coming out of retrograde. So just like the other two transits, I'm going to start this through a Western lens, and then I'm going to shift to what this looks like and through like how Ifa would describe what's happening. So this is, to me, this counterbalance to the Mars energy. Like, this is to help kind of balance some, to kind of soften some of that energy up. So Jupiter is the great benefic. It is the archetypal energy of wisdom, expansion, and growth, among other things. When Jupiter stations direct, its influence becomes more externally active again. And in Cancer specifically, the energy becomes deeply nurturing and protective. So Jupiter in Cancer. So Cancer represents home, ancestry, emotional roots, safety, nourishment, and the divine mother. So Jupiter amplifies those themes. So instead of expansion through conquest or ambition, we get expansion through care, belonging, protection, emotional intelligence, family, and lineage. And there are plenty of feminine signs, but Cancer is the sacred mother. It is a sacred mother. So the other transits we discussed have a very strong masculine, type of activation, a very strong masculine activation. However, Jupiter in Cancer brings this additional balancing of some of that feminine energy. So as we move forward, what are we protecting? What are we nurturing? And what kind of home are we building? Movement alone isn't enough. The path must lead somewhere life sustaining. Intuition grounded in reality. And looking at the distinction between Pisces and Cancers, Pisces intuition can be cosmic and also kind of like diffuse because its nebulous nature, its expansiveness without boundaries, where Cancer's intuition is also very strong, but it's very grounded. So it's more embodied and emotionally connected. So it's the kind of intuition that says this feels safe, this feels wrong, this feels nurturing, and this feels harmful. So Jupiter here strengthens our emotional and intuitive discernment, and it helps people recognize what actually supports their well-being. So then we have the roots, heritage, and cultural memory. So Jupiter expanding Cancer can also manifest as an interest in ancestry, rediscovery of cultural traditions, reconnecting with lineage, and building family structures intentionally. It's expansion through remembering where we come from. The tie, the ancestral wisdom that we mentioned in part one about like what's rising from the surface with Neptune, would be ancient wisdom, which is again being supported here. Now, as I was looking at this, my mind says, Lilith is moving through Sagittarius. And Jupiter rules both Pisces and Sagittarius. And I was like, I wonder what this bonus transit impact is having. So Lilith moving through Sagittarius can represent rebellion against dogma, reclaiming truth, confronting hypocrisy in institutions, radical freedom of belief. So Sagittarius governs philosophy, religion, and worldview. So Lilith there often exposes where belief systems have been weaponized or misused. When Jupiter is in Cancer at the same time, we get this interesting dialogue between two feminine archetypes. Cancer being the nurturing mother and Lilith the untamed feminine. One protects and one is challenging. Together they push toward authentic freedom rooted in emotional truth. So when we start bringing all these things together, the story comes something similar to this. Hidden truths surface. Destiny demands action. The path must be cleared, but the movement must protect and nourish life. So now we have this deeper question of what kind of world are we building as we clear these paths? Because progress without care can destroy the very things we need to sustain ourselves. Awakening. So this is not just a spiritual awakening, but a spiritual awakening as spiritual responsibility. Awakening is the realization, but responsibility is what happens after the realization. So now we're looking at the question is whether or not this is a correction or a preparation for something larger that hasn't fully unfolded yet. And I feel like it's both, honestly. I feel like it's both. It's a correction that is going to prepare for something larger that hasn't fully unfolded. So now going to the EFI lens of Jupiter and Cancer, the witness of our destiny. So through EFI lens, Jupiter um, is likened to the witness to our destiny, not destiny itself, but the wisdom that helps us recognize and fulfill our destiny. So it represents divine guidance, philosophical understanding, spiritual counsel, and the teacher who reminds us what we chose before arriving here. So when this energy station comes out of retrograde, that wisdom we have been internalizing all this time, we've been doing a lot of introspection, a lot of looking inside, a lot of understanding where we're being called. Now it's time to move forward. The knowledge becomes applied wisdom. We've been gathering knowledge, we've been gathering data. Now it's time to turn that knowledge and data into wisdom by moving forward in it. So the questions that were happening during retrograde were like its internal cultivation. What are my natural gifts? What wisdom have my ancestors left for me? What talents have I been ignoring? And what spiritual practices strengthen my alignment? So this is the learning and integration phase. It's quiet, reflective, and often deeply personal. It's like sitting with the oracle, sitting with the ancestors and asking questions and gathering insight. Now that you've done that, this is where wisdom takes action. So instead of saying, what am I learning? Now we're being asked, how am I applying what I've learned? Wisdom that stays internal eventually stagnates. It doesn't, because if it stays internal, it does not become wisdom. It's just knowledge. It's just knowledge. When we use it, apply it, it takes action is what makes it wisdom. So knowledge that becomes an action begins to shape the world around us with wisdom. So this transit is directing that. Now that this energy is direct, it invites people to express their understanding through leadership, teaching, creative work, community building, and spiritual service. Now, looking at the sacred mother and fulfillment of our full potential. This energy is happening through the frequency of Eros Meiji as the fulfillment of our full potential. And so this is represented here through our lineage, the ancestral gifts and talents that we have inherited. It is through the power of women because it's associated with menstrual blood. So there's a very call to the power of females in particular. Um, and it's also very practical in its nature. So this wisdom is amplifying the process of becoming who we were meant to be by our connection to our ancestors, our heritage, and our intuitive wisdom. So what would it look like to fully nurture the life that we were meant to live? So as I was thinking about this, this was not simply feminine energy. Because yes, it is about feminine energy for itself, but there is a strong emphasis on the power of women themselves with that call out on this, aerosol meaning menstrual blood. So, with the witness to our destiny moving through this space, amplifying this energy, it can highlight women claiming authority, ancestral maternal wisdom resurfacing, and restoring of the balance of feminine power that has been long suppressed. So, this made me think about, Black women who have been pushed out of their roles, pushed out of employment, and the question of, if you've been pushed out of there and you have not been able to return, where should you actually be headed? Black women, where should you actually be heading? So, also, this looks like this return to our ancestral tools. So, truths and mysteries revealed, people feeling compelled to act, and reminding us that of the tools that we have, like from our ancestors, lived experience, natural talent, spiritual training, and cultural wisdom. So, what tools have already been placed in our hands? What tools have already been placed in our hands? Because often people search for something new when the real work is using what they already carry. That was aggressive, even towards myself. That was aggressive, even directly at myself. So we cannot ignore this witness of destiny and the correlation to divination. So when confusion arises, the answer is not always speculation. The answer is consultation. Divination exists specifically for moments when intuition feels unclear, circumstances are complex, and multiple paths appear possible. Divination helps move a person from mystery to understanding. One of the things that came up in a class a long time ago was God works in mysterious ways, and I said, until you divine on it. That shirt's on my site. That captures the essence of this transit beautifully. Mystery becomes wisdom when we seek guidance. So, another concept is cultivating knowledge versus cultivating wisdom. Knowledge is accumulation, wisdom is application. Many people spend years gathering data, gathering information, but the turning point comes when they ask, how does this change how I live? So this energy no longer being internalized, but now being out external in action and expressive is asking that same question. So if we put everything together, the message becomes truth has been revealed. Destiny is calling for action, and the wisdom needed to act has already been cultivated. So the question is, will you live according to what you know? The role of devotion and consistency. Devotion in spiritual discipline is also very important. Freedom in spiritual traditions rarely comes from randomness. It comes from consistency, daily practice, repeated alignment, perseverance. Over time, that discipline creates clarity and protection. That's where the freedom emerges from. It's time to stop pretending you don't know who you are. Many people receive glimpses of their potential long before they are ready to embody it, but eventually there comes a moment where the path forward becomes unmistakable. At that point, the real question is no longer discovery, it's courage. It's courage. The revelation, the action, and the wisdom. The revelation, the action, and the wisdom. Now, is this simply just an awakening, or are we at a space where this is an initiation? My godmother, she used to say that you will initiate in the spiritual realm way before you ever initiate into the physical. Like before you initiate in the physical realm, it'll happen in the spiritual realm. It'll happen in the spiritual realm. So this is going to be something that feels like both. Like I said in the first video, I feel like the energy is going to bring about some insight for younger people coming forward. So it feels like, yeah, I kind of know this. And that's why it doesn't necessarily feel initiatory, nor does it feel like awakening. It feels like accepting. It feels very much like accepting. Um, it doesn't just feel like this shocking revelation. It just feels like recognizing something you've already been told. So I guess it's more recognition. It feels like recognition. So using myself as the example, back in 2020 is when my spiritual awakening happened, or at least the first one anyway, or the conscious one. Realized looking at some things I was like having small ones going forward, but 2020 I had a conscious, like I was consciously aware I was having a spiritual awakening. And in that moment there was confusion, disorientation, lots of questions and shifts in my identity. And this is like this cracking open moment. Um, but afterwards, it's like I get this, yeah, that tracks. Initially, people would say things to me in the very beginning, and people were like just telling me who I was, and I just like, who? Do you have the right person? That can't be me. That can't be me. I don't know who you're talking about, but it can't be me. But as of late, certain things that have been said to me from other people, I just sit there and like, you know what? Yeah, that tracks. That tracks. That's tracks. And even in there was a live that I got to sit in and be a part of with Aloye Ewa. Make sure you're following her YouTube channel. And she went over this Odu that I get often. Like I've gotten this Odu before. And I've seen this Eton before, but when she interpreted it that day, I was like, oh, because it never landed on me in that way. And it's probably because I wasn't ready for it to land in that way. And, you know, sometimes there are things that it's just about timing. Like, it's about timing. And the feeling is like, for a lot of us, it's going to be like you went to bed one evening and you woke up and it's like, I'm in a ceremony. Like, you're not literally in one, but that's what it feels like. You went to bed and woke up dressed in white and in ceremony. There's already offerings being given, divination being done. And you're like, when did I get to initiation? That's what this moment in time probably feels like. A lot of us stepping into the role, the ceremony for that role has already started. Drums are playing, people are chanting, and you're like, oh, this is for me. And you're like, this feels odd, but appropriate. It feels like, you know what? Yeah, this is here. And that's your nervous system kind of settling because you've already been prepared. And a lot of times, you'll hear something and it's like, I know, but as you get closer to where you're supposed to be, that but is disappearing. So before it'd be like maybe later, maybe someone else, or maybe I'm misinterpreting this. Eventually all those qualifiers fall away and the statement becomes simpler. Okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. So the groundwork has already happened. Learning, experiences, moments, work, all of these things have already been happening. All these things happening, like the initiation has already begun. And now you realize that you're inside it. Now you just are realizing you're inside it. So I want you to pay attention to your body at this time. You may feel things like there's things I need to do, but you'll also feel like maybe your body is slowing down. Your instinct to move quickly is understandable when clarity arrives, but the body knows something that the mind forgets. The work is not a sprint. It's not a sprint. Long paths require pacing. Long paths are going to require pacing. What you're looking for is strategy. This is strategy. This is strategy. Set goals. What are some of the milestones? Have a strategy. This should feel not like a burden. You should be at a pace now that you're moving from feeling burden to feeling responsibility. Burden feels like something imposed. Responsibility feels like something accepted consciously. And the moment you see that, your work stops feeling random. It will become intentional. When you step into your role, your align your actions with your purpose, you manage your energy intentionally and allow the work to unfold over time. The weight becomes manageable because it's now distributed properly. There's often this period where someone feels like they are running constantly, preparing, building, learning. Then a moment comes where the realization lands. And after the realization, things often become more deliberate rather than faster. Movement continues, but it becomes more focused, more intentional. And understanding I still have work to do, and that's okay. And that's okay. So understand that once you see the weight and you know what you're carrying, you shift your body. You adjust your posture. You adjust your posture. And then you realize they've actually been training me to carry this weight, just not consciously. So, we are now at the end of our discussion. Drop me some comments to let me know, did you listen to both parts? Did you listen to this one? Now you're going back to part one to see what you missed. What did you learn? And again, this reminder, this is like a collective summary. So now you need to go and see where this is happening in your own life, in your own charts. And yes, you do need your birth time and location to do that. Also, if you're like, what does this mean for me? I don't have my birth chart. I don't know what to do. Yes, I can consultify. Like, based upon all of these things, what moment are you in at this moment? What is being called of you? What is being asked of you? How do you move forward in alignment with your wellness and your good condition while living the fullness of your destiny? Again, I am Ianifo Owini. I will send you Adina Durusimi. I am the founder of Temple Oturukongunda, which is the Sacred Grove of Wisdom and Fellowship Incorporated. Feel free to join my mailing list. I am also going to have a nice little downloadable with some of these questions that I pose throughout this two-part conversation that you can download and ask yourself, make these some journal prompts. Maybe this is a question you can pose in divination, whether this is you come and get a divination or you go to your elder for a divination, or maybe you're just simply pulling cards and divining or consulting Ifa for yourself. Whatever that looks like, this is the time. This is the time. And if that lands and you're like, I know, then it's time to stop playing. It's time to stop playing. I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Make sure you again have hit that subscribe and turn on the notification, and make sure to follow me on my other platforms. I'll see you next time. Odabo.